Good evening, and welcome to Engage at the Bush Center, presented by Highland Capital Management. I'm Holly Kuzmich, Executive Director of the Bush Institute. Thank you all for joining us tonight for an important conversation on the state of the American dream. Tonight's program is connected to the work of the Bush Institute-SMU Economic Growth Initiative and to the winter edition of our quarterly Journal of Ideas, The Catalyst, which explores the state of the American dream in great depth. Contributors to this edition of The Catalyst include former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, historian Sarah Churchwell, and General Alfred Flowers. One of tonight's panelists, my friend Dionne Gumbs, is from our Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. She contributed an essay to The Catalyst, as did our own Joseph Kim, a member of our team at the Bush Institute, who has a unique perspective on this issue as a North Korean refugee. Tonight's moderator, Cullum Clark, is another contributor to The Catalyst. If you don't already receive it, please sign up at bushcenter.org. One goal of our Engage series is advancing the way our audience thinks about important issues, and tonight we'll tackle the many facets of the American dream. Of course, immigration policy plays a central role in accessing the American dream, and this year we are putting a significant emphasis on that issue. For decades, our country's had a broken immigration system, and we're long overdue for reform. We believe a more modern system can strengthen American values and keep our country competitive. Our team here is working with leaders in the administration and Congress to advance reform, and you'll hear a lot from us this year on this issue. Of course, you'll hear about it tonight from one of our panelists, Jorge Lima, who specializes in this issue, and again in the coming months when our special exhibit on immigration opens here at the Bush Center. In April, we're all anticipating the publication of President Bush's new book, Out of Many One, which includes the 43 portraits he painted of immigrants as well as their stories. So stay tuned for more from us on that important issue. I want to particularly, again, thank our friends at Highland Capital Management for their support of the Engage series. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cullum Clark, a director of the Bush Institute-SMU Economic Growth Initiative, to get us started and introduce our panel of experts. Cullum, over to you.
Thank you, Holly. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm honored to be moderating tonight's conversation with three remarkable people. Tonight's topic is the state of the American dream. Now, everyone has their own conception of what the American dream means. Some say the American dream has faded beyond reach for most Americans. Some even go so far as to say that in some ways it's dead. Others, and I count myself in this group, believe the American dream is alive and well, but it needs fresh thinking to catch up with new realities and to make it still more inclusive. At the George W. Bush Institute, I lead our Blueprint for Opportunity program, which focuses on the challenge of expanding opportunity and economic mobility in America's economy. We've recently published an in-depth report, Cities and Opportunity in the 21st Century America, which looks into why cities, towns, even neighborhoods so powerfully influence people's prospects and opportunities. We've also recently published a set of policy recommendations to promote a pro-opportunity agenda at all levels of government as part of a larger set of new policy briefs from the Bush Institute. And as Holly mentioned, I've also written a brief essay in the new issue of The Catalyst, which came out today. And it's on the idea of the American dream in history and today. I go back to a set of what I would call distinctively American ideas that actually emerged very early after the American Revolution. And as I read about them, caused me to sort of say, aha. Based on these ideas, I argue in my piece that we should measure how we're doing, the state of the American dream, less in dollars and more in dignity. And by this I mean that we should look at how well we're doing in recognizing the equal intrinsic worth of each individual in our society. And how we're doing it recognizing everyone's right to pursue happiness and flourish in their own way without constraints imposed by class or by race or gender or social convention or any other kind of circumstance. And I argue that when we look at how we're doing in this way, it's clarifying. It clarifies the great progress we've made, but it also clarifies why the work of expanding the American dream to everyone remains very much a work in progress. And that brings me to tonight's panelists. We are very honored to be joined tonight by three great leaders who are each leading important efforts to expand the reach of the American dream. Dionne Gumbs is the founder and CEO of GenEQTY, which aims to empower women and multicultural business owners, remove financial obstacles, and close the wealth gap. Dionne has a deep background in finance, including time at JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, and we're proud to say, as Holly said, she was a member of our class of 2018 Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. And Jalen Smith isn't the only athlete with us tonight. Dionne was a track athlete at the University of Pennsylvania. She joins us tonight from Plymouth, Minnesota. Hello, Dionne. Jorge Lima is Senior Vice President of Policy at Americans for Prosperity, and he also leads the immigration work of the philanthropic organization Stand Together. Jorge has extensive experience in both the private and public sectors, and he previously served as the policy director of the Libre Initiative, a leading Hispanic voice for pro-opportunity policies. He also served as strategic policy advisor to Luis Fortuno, former governor of Puerto Rico. Jorge joins us tonight from Washington, D.C. Jalen Smith is known to most of us as a starting linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys and a former All-American at Notre Dame. What you may not know is that growing up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Jalen always wanted to be a business executive. In a few minutes, we'll hear directly from Jalen about his personal story and his work to mentor and provide funding to minority entrepreneurs through his Minority Entrepreneurship Institute. Jalen was recently honored as a nominee for the prestigious Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, given annually by the NFL to the player who has made the most significant positive impact on his community. Jalen joins us tonight from Frisco, Texas. Jalen, let's start with you. You are a leading advocate for minority entrepreneurs. How did you become interested in this work?
For me, wanting to be a businessman at the age of 11, kind of identifying my like and interest in the field, being able to develop a great network, great access to not only quality deal flow, but relationships are so important in this world, and grasping the concept of how far a relationship can take you, and in knowledge and education and understanding of, trying to achieve that financial freedom. For me, understanding that and gaining access, I was thinking about, okay, so for people that look like me that don't have the background of a Notre Dame network or playing for America's team, or being a football player, having a significant platform, I wanted to think about, okay, how can I provide these type of opportunities for the Black and brown Latinx community, people that look like me that don't have that platform. Business matters, the financial knowledge matters, and it's something that's dear to my heart. So took it to my team. I'm a visionary myself, and we were able to form the Minority Entrepreneurship Institute to help close that economic and educational gap.
So let me follow up on that, Jalen. You've written in the Dallas Morning News that you have been privileged to live the American dream, and you've also been privileged to play for America's team, as we like to think of it here, but that far too many Black and Hispanic people don't believe the dream is available to them. And you've launched the Institute, just for the audience to know, the Institute holds what you call showcase business competitions, kind of like Shark Tank, and you have made an amazingly generous pledge to your own organization to help close the wealth gap. Could you tell us more about the Institute, your showcases? What are your goals for this program?
Yes, the goal is helping educate, is helping provide three sectors of financial funding, mentorship, in helping create solid infrastructures, helping create successful strategic execution plans for minorities to be able to execute. There's so many people in the Black and brown Latinx community that have great and tremendous ideas, but lack access to financial funding. Based on the system set up, it's always been hard for colored people to go out and get a small business loan, or different type of equities, or from a housing standpoint, and just a lot of things that we have to overcome. So kind of creating this infrastructure to be able to help some great senators that I believe can help other people in the society achieve the American dream. We all want access to our time, and through financial freedom, through access and understanding, being able to gain some real wealth can help you create that. Everyone deserves that opportunity in this world, and it's just a matter of, okay, how can we, kind of help fix this problem that's going on, this scandal.
Okay. We'll come back in a little bit to the showcase because the stories of the companies are fantastic. But Dionne, let's go to you. In your philanthropic and professional life, you too are engaged in trying to expand opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs and promoting ideas to close the wealth gap. People with big dreams but challenging obstacles that they face. Could you tell us about your work? Tell us about GenEQTY. How did you arrive at what you're doing now, and what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, thank you. So GenEQTY is really a project turned wonderful passion company of mine that was born out of my experience at PLS. So, I always have to be thankful for the team at PLS for pushing me to really realize that and what I think and know it will become. To Jalen's point, we know that the wealth gap in this country is forever widening, right? Especially post-COVID. And we also know that the impact it has is particularly felt on women and minority entrepreneurs and people of color. So businesses and business owners that comprise of over 50% of the market really struggle to get to the optimal points of success. And Jalen is doing wonderful work with that. And tangentially at GenEQTY, we kind of looked at the market and said, why is it so easy for us to kind of do dinner and a movie, right, through Netflix and DoorDash, but technology hasn't been able to catch up to allow us to run businesses more efficiently, the financial aspects of our businesses more efficiently. And so GenEQTY is really a financial technology platform that we know will allow programs like Jalen's and others and bank platforms to scale and provide the right kinds of financial tools and services to those that need it most, so that this wealth gap that we keep talking about can begin to shrink, because we do understand the impact of small businesses in this country, particularly in this moment. So that's the work that I've been doing with GenEQTY. We are a financial technology company, but our real goal and mission, I think, is what sets us apart in that we are constantly thinking about why we exist and why we're here.
Now, looking at the GenEQTY website, I know that that GenEQTY focuses in part on taking down obstacles that block access to capital. So I know Jalen also referred to this. How much of an obstacle is access to capital for small businesses, particularly owned by people of color and women?
Yeah, I think, we can then get into a very much longer discussion about, the systems that weren't created to optimally support Black and brown entrepreneurs. That's another panel that we can do, which I'd love to engage in that conversation as well. But we definitely see inherent biases that exist, whether it's through traditional banking, whether it's through even online banking, and whether it's through credit unions and CDFIs, right, which are really structured to help and serve our communities. The reality is these inherent biases have shortened the life cycle of companies that could otherwise really be very successful. And they come in many different forms. Of course, the numbers are very, very prolific on the venture capital side, right, where we see that a very small percentage of capital goes to female entrepreneurs, and an even smaller percentage of capital goes to Black female entrepreneurs. And we know that in order for us to really move the needle on pushing innovation and on pushing our country's economy and job creation, we have to begin to rethink how capital is distributed and who it's distributed to.
Excellent, thank you. Jorge, your work too focuses on expanding opportunity. I think in your case, you've been very focused on opportunity among relatively new Americans, which is to say immigrants. You've said that the work of Stand Together starts from some basic principles, I think you said essential American principles, breaking down barriers, believing in people. Please tell us about Stand Together. What are your goals, and particularly in the area of opportunity and inclusion for immigrants?
Thank you, Cullum. Quick note of thanks before we get started, though. I would say Thanks to you and our host, the Bush Center, for the invitation. Thanks to the folks listening in, and a big thanks to my fellow panelists here. I feel like the small fish on this stage, given the accomplishments and the incredible work that they just described. It really is incredible. I get to work on immigration, as you mentioned, and I get to do it at an organization called Stand Together. Stand Together is a philanthropic community that's devoted to helping every person rise. And we do that by partnering with individuals and organizations throughout the country that see the world as we do, which is with a strong belief in people. And that with that belief, you can actually start to tackle some of the biggest problems we're facing as a society. And so when we say we believe in people, we mean all people. And that is what guides our philosophy on all of our issues, but particularly immigration. We know that individuals have unique abilities and unique contributions, and when they are free to develop those and apply them, it not only improves their lives, but it improves the lives of the people around them and their communities, and eventually overall to the entire country. And as we've seen most evidently during this pandemic, even the world, with the work that immigrants have been doing across the world to help us get through this pandemic. And when we look at the issue of immigration, you mentioned and asked about goals. We look at three broad buckets in terms of what we want to see done in order to kind of get closer to this reality. And so one is, we know we need a better system, right? Anyone that wants to talk about immigration will point directly to the federal system and the need to actually have a system that Americans and immigrants can trust, a system that they can navigate, one that is both based on a welcoming notion for immigrants who are motivated to contribute, for them to have the ability to come to the country, as well as one that takes into account the need to protect the country from those who wish to do harm. Secondly, the important thing is to make sure that once we have immigrants, that there aren't barriers standing in the way to their contributions. And we want to make sure that we're partnering with folks on the ground throughout the country to see how we can reduce barriers that are holding people back from truly contributing to their communities. And then lastly, I'd say we want to make sure that we're just constantly reminding and promoting America's welcoming nature and the benefits that come from collaboration. That is key to us, right? Our stance on immigration is not buying into this false choice that we see far too often, where you can either be pro-immigrant or pro-America. We believe you can actually be both, and that the American people believe we can be both and want us to be both. And so you do that by saying, let's welcome immigrants who want to come here, who want to improve their lives and improve the lives of others. And by doing so, we're all going to benefit. That collaboration that comes when immigrants and non-immigrants are working together is what is fueling us forward. We've seen it in history, and we hope to see it again in America's future.
Jorge, the new issue of The Catalyst, as you know, is about the state of the American dream. How would you characterize the state of the American dream for America's 45 to 50 million immigrants?
So, I mean, it's a great question. And I think you'll see, or we can see, that there's some learnings to observe on the whole, but of course it's very different for every individual. But I'll start with that idea of the whole, and I think there's reasons to be excited. One, poll after poll continues to show that there's still this belief in the American dream, and that it takes into account the immigrants that are in this country. They will say that they still believe the American dream is real. And even for those who are not included in any of those polls, we know by the actions that they're taking. Immigrants are still coming to America. They come here because they truly believe that there's an opportunity for them here, for them to have the freedom that will allow them to develop, again, those unique skills and contributions that they know that they inherently have. A couple other positive things. We know that today, when asked about the American dream, those who believe most in the American dream tend to skew young, tend to come more from minority populations, and those are two big factors that describe immigrants, right? Immigrants tend to be on the younger side. They are over-indexing in minority communities. And so that just leads you to an understanding that the immigrants that are coming to America, immigrants that have been in America, continue to believe in that dream. But I think there's also a reality that comes a little bit leaning into what Jalen and Dionne were talking about. And there still are barriers that exist that prevent folks from actually realizing that dream or getting to live that dream to this full fulfillment. And so there's still very tangible things that we need to work on so that we bring down those barriers, and so that the folks who currently will tell us they believe in that American dream can actually realize it.
Thanks, Jorge. Dionne, I'd love to ask you the same question because you've certainly lived the American dream as someone who came to the United States as a young girl. How do you think about the state of the American dream for immigrants to the United States?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with much of what Jorge mentioned, with a few additions. I do think that when we think about the American dream, we also have to think about, who it's for, right? And where the tenets of it originated. Despite what we hear, we're a country of immigrants, right? We all came here. We all, whether it was on a ship as founding fathers or by other means, right, through the slave trade, we all descended upon this land. And so we all should be proud that we've been able to knit together a nation of immigrants from different backgrounds and cultures to create the United States. I think that gets lost, right, as we think about immigration policy. But the reality is the American dream is really the special sauce that makes us the pinnacle still to this day of what democracy is supposed to look like. And for me, as someone that's come over here and had family that sacrificed to bring me and my husband and my other family members to where we are today, I think it is something that we should truly embrace. But to Jorge's point, not do it with blinders on. I don't think that we can kind of look today and say, this is a system that works for everyone. It inherently cannot work for everyone because it was not built for everyone. It was built for a very specific subsegment of the population and by a very specific subsegment of the population. And so kind of with that in mind, the question really becomes not do we believe in the American dream as it existed in the past, but really, how do we allow the American dream to evolve based on the kind of new, diverse population that is now America? I hope that's helpful.
Extremely so. Jalen, so Dionne and Jorge have just both spoken of barriers. You've oftentimes talked about gaps that minority entrepreneurs face. So based on your experience, what are the most important gaps? We've talked about capital, but how would you characterize it?
Yeah, I would say financial funding for sure. 2% of venture dollars are going to people of color. That alone gives you a little bit of idea of the lack of access. I think when you talk about the American dream, I believe it also starts at home, in having a clear understanding of how to operate cleanly in this country, how, being able to understand, finances and understand, how to have a budget, understanding how to really educate yourselves and kind of pass that type of knowledge on to your feeders. A huge problem is, especially in the communities, in the minority communities, the parents aren't educated on new technologies and on how to really create access and how to gain real knowledge on about furthering your platforms to achieve that American dream. And if the parent isn't learning it, then it's not being passed down from a generational standpoint, and that can create just a huge lack. It can create a huge deficit, and that's what we see. So the first thing is awareness, being aware of the situation and how it occurred, understanding our history. And you talk about how we all got over here and migrated, and the Constitution and things about who it was written for. Well, the world looks different today. And we got to come together and figure out how can we accomplish this together? How can we provide this type of access and opportunity so everyone can get a shot at living the American dream? But America has changed, so there's a way we all got to go about this and attack this together.
Couldn't agree more. Drilling down a little bit more into a couple of these topics. Dionne, back to you. You and I have both, in different ways, written about the importance of building what you call generational wealth, wealth that passes down and opens up opportunity for the next generation. What are we talking about here, and why is this so important?
McKinsey did a study in 2016 about the wealth gap. And in that study, it was particularly focused on the black and brown communities. But in that study, it really highlighted that the disparity in wealth continues to grow across generations, particularly in Black communities. And it cited a few key reasons for that, one of which kind of resonated with me, right? So the ways that we think about building wealth in this country are typically home ownership or business ownership. And you see in Black and brown communities in particularly, there is an immense amount of innovation. It might not be the way we currently and traditionally think about it, but because we cannot rely solely on our one paychecks, right, we tend to invent and participate in our local economies in a very, very unique and different way. However, that does not result into passing wealth down. In fact, the interesting statistic in that study is middle class families, kids that grow out of Black middle class families, 70% of those will actually drop out of the middle class when they hit adulthood. I mean, 70%. Right. So if you grow up even in a nice neighborhood, in a mixed neighborhood, your neighbor across the street probably will go on to have a great job and be able to participate in an economy in a way that's very different than you are, and have been able to if you are a Black and brown person. I mean, those are kind of staggering numbers that I really do think shape the way wealth is distributed in our country, to the disadvantage of Black and brown communities. So when I talk about generational wealth, I'm really thinking about it through furthering entrepreneurship and furthering business ownership. Because if we continue to say that that is the lifeblood of our country, we have to remove the obstacles that allow more more businesses to fail, and increase the success rate of companies that start and innovate in ways that we typically don't think about. And that innovation really starts in our local communities, Black and brown communities.
So Jalen, let's go back to you, because Dionne just talked about, and I think this was a powerful statement, the immense amount of innovation that comes from both human creativity, but also out of necessity, out of the unique circumstances in the Black and brown communities. And you are squarely in the middle of that with the Minority Entrepreneurship Institute. So you've now held showcase competitions, as you call them, in Fort Wayne, your hometown, and Dallas, and another one coming up soon. And the winner of your Dallas showcase, or one of the winners, I should say, was a really impressive young company called Xirtue that seems to me to be living out what Dionne just spoke to, a real-life example of living the American dream, the founders, but also doing it in a way that creates opportunities for others in a very innovative way. You've got to be proud of this. Could you tell us about Xirtue and the people behind it?
Absolutely. It really just a beautiful deal. And Xirtue providing an opportunity for lending and for borrowing. We live in a world where your family and your friends will need you and want help and want access. And when you're giving, you want to understand how to give. You want to understand the principle of giving, and if you give, is it something where you're borrowing? Is it something where you're expecting someone to pay yourselves back? And the Xirtue kind of creates a platform to where you can safely, generously donate to your family member, to your friend. And be able to, kind of govern, them paying you back. It's a wonderful deal. When you talk about MEI and everything that we're involved in and investing in and partnering, it's a beautiful thing to understand the impact you want to make. In last year's showcase in Dallas, Texas, we're able to award over $600,000 to 5 winners. Our venture pitch this year will be opening up the Florida market, and it'll be held in Tampa, Florida this year, where the Super Bowl was just played.
A happy city these days.
Absolutely. It's just trying to create some real access and traction, and we're always here looking for for impact investors at MEI, and for anyone that wants to get involved, it matters, and we're giving back so much more than financial funding, helping mentorship and helping improve mental capacities and things of that nature. So, like I said, MEI is my purpose beyond athletics. I've always been more than just an athlete, and in being able to live this out, I thank my team and over at Rise Sports Advisors and in my MEI committee, just helping put together a great plan and action to be able to help close this wealth gap that exists in this day, and helping more people achieve that American dream, a dream that we're talking about. A lot of people don't see the light because they don't understand, and you don't know what you don't know. And that's why education matters, and it's something that's dear to my heart. So I'm excited, and I'm extremely encouraging that it starts at home. It starts at home. We got to get the homes right, and we all can be right.
Well, if I could just say something about what is so exciting about the Xertu concept to me, and I say this as an economist who thinks that there's a lot of lessons from history. There's lessons from history about all of the origins of all the barriers that have come up, but there's also origins from history about how opportunity has been created. And I think one thing people oftentimes don't think about enough is just how important it's been historically for capital to circulate within communities locally. That is how one, for example, immigrant group after another in American history kind of got itself settled and off the ground, got businesses created. And it's also, I think it's fair to say, how we saw a tremendous emergence of a black middle class, even in very segregated times, facing every imaginable obstacle, and yet it still happened because of things like this. And yet they're taking this historical lesson and they're applying very contemporary technology tools. I think that's amazing. Jorge, I do want to come back to... Yes, sir. Sorry, Jalen?
No, I was just going to say Xertu just being a prime example of practicing group economics.
Exactly.
And we know a lot about that, and it has to be continuously, just transpired throughout the country.
Exactly. Jorge, I just threw out something about the historic success of immigrants. You've talked about how we need to take down barriers and we need to fix a broken system. Could you give us your sort of high level, what is it we need to do right from here? What should be the high priorities?
Sure, and I think that one of the first things that we got to do is to make sure that folks are understanding that the American dream is not fixed. I think right now we're stuck in this almost fear-based approach to immigration because there's a sense that there's not enough, and that opening the country to immigration means we as Americans are losing something. And nothing can be further the truth. In fact, the American dream itself has improved, has expanded, the more we've broadened the amount of people who have the opportunity to achieve that American dream, right? Throughout the history of this country, every time massive movements have been successful, whether it was the movement to abolish slavery, women's suffrage, civil rights, gay marriage, time and time again, America has seen that when she is broadening the opportunity to achieve the American dream and offering more people the freedom and the ability, again, to develop their skills and apply them in communities, that is when all of us benefit much more, and that is when all of us start to see and realize that there is the possibility of that American dream. So I think it starts with that fundamental understanding that it is actually in our best interest when we have a strong and robust immigration system. Now, on the specifics of that, again, I think we have to start with then looking at our system and understanding, is this system based on the idea that we want to welcome those motivated immigrants, or is this a system that is trying to keep America isolated? I mean, that is when we actually see things decay and essentially die. It's when it's isolated, when it is closed off from things that can help it, change and be dynamic. You've heard Jalen just talked a little bit about how America has changed. America is constantly changing, right? I couldn't agree more. We have to be able to allow for that dynamic interaction to take place, and immigration is a core part of that. Now, that does mean, though, we need to have a system. We need to have a system that both has the trust of the American people and has the faith that immigrants know that they can navigate it. So our system right now is extremely complicated, as any immigrant who's tried to go through the system can tell you. And we've got to make sure that we have robust legal channels that allow folks to truly navigate that and get to the point where they can come in and contribute. And if you do have that, then you have the components that also provide for the enforcement of that, right? If we have a respectable system, if we have a system that could easily be followed, that is not just kind of designed to help people fall into traps, but actually one that people can navigate, then our enforcement mechanisms can actually be focused on people wishing to do us harm versus what we see too often today, that it's focused on very good people who are stuck in a very bad system. And so that includes making sure that we look at our visa programs so that we understand immigrants that can come tomorrow. It means making that we look at the immigrants who are here today. There are estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants that are living in the country. That has to be addressed. Living in the shadows is not good for the communities, and it's not good for those immigrants. And we know that by and large, the majority of those immigrants are actually contributing to society, and the American public will tell you they want to find a way to provide those immigrants a legal status. We also have to think about our humanitarian angle and start really looking at our refugee and asylum processes. A lot of folks today are pointing to the asylum process and saying that it's broken. I would venture to say that the asylum process itself is not broken, but it's evidence that the system is broken, and so many immigrants are coming in through the asylum process because that seems to be the only way that they can understand how to actually get into the country. Right. And so we really have to fix the entire system to make sure that we are providing channels for people to go to that are not just always looking at asylum as the right way to come in. And so if we can look at that and address, again, the immigrants that are here today, the system, so we can think about the immigrants that are coming tomorrow, and then making sure that we have the enforcement mechanisms to show Americans that we can trust the system is being applied. I think that's how you start to get to the point where more folks are welcomed, and you're then starting to see this growth again of the American dream, of the opportunities that come, again, when we broaden that opportunity to more and more folks.
Well, we've talked a lot about history, and we talked a lot about the big picture of where we need to go as a country. A tragic reality is that the pandemic over the last 11 months seems like an almost like it was perfectly designed by an evil genius to thwart everything we're talking about and to create new barriers that hold back so many Americans, particularly disadvantaged ones of all kinds. Dionne, I'd love to ask all of you all about this, but Dionne, let's start with you. New data show that the pandemic has taken a terrible toll on people of color. It's taken a terrible toll on women's participation in the workforce, and it's been shining a bright light on the invisible burdens so many women bear, and you've been very focused on financial empowerment of women. So thoughts on the impact of the pandemic?
You know, I don't think I could have said it better myself. I don't know if we needed new data. We could have taken data from before 2020 to show us and highlight the discrepancies. But this has really been, embers to a flame, right? Is what the pandemic really has been. So a small flame that was already burning, big for some of us that live it daily, but that shed the light and opened everyone else's eyes to some of the struggles and challenges that whether you are a woman, a black woman, a person of color, an immigrant, a minority of any kind, the pandemic really just highlighted and made very, very clear some of the structural challenges that really exist as it pertains to being a working mother, being a single working mother if you're a woman, and really being the focal point of your family. So for women in particular, going back to your question, we play many different roles, right, in our families. We're usually caregivers and caretakers for older parents. We sometimes are child rearing our siblings, depending on the age. And then we also have our own families that we have to think about. Many of us are managing single households, and many of us are with spouses that are working tirelessly as well. And so that balance and burden always falls on women in the household. And this pandemic, with schools closed and declining jobs, has really placed an extraordinary burden on people women that are breadwinners in their families, but now have to make a decision of how they're also going to do childcare. It has highlighted why it has been so important that we focus on the infrastructure of what it means to support working mothers of all kinds in order to propel our economy. And that's really what I think it comes down to.
Jalen, I'd love to ask a similar question to you. The pandemic has been it's been calamitous for our society, and it's taken a particularly terrible toll on opportunities for Black and Hispanic people. Could you reflect on what you've learned over this experience?
I believe, I was young around the 08 recession. So my just business knowledge and just intellect of, life, not really being able to really grasp the full concept of what happened, what's going on. Experiencing this pandemic, I believe everyone has been affected by this, and it's presented one thing for everyone, an opportunity to persevere through adversity. Everyone experienced something different from this situation, a real world pandemic. So I think the biggest thing is just understanding the opportunity, understanding how we can grow, and then understanding the metrics that it takes to get there. So that's really what's going on. Just kind of my thoughts behind the pandemic. It's something that we'll all remember forever.
So true, and I sure salute the idea that we try to treat it as an opportunity to grow. Jorge, your thoughts on the impact of the pandemic on people's aspirations, people's opportunities over the last year?
I echo what has been said here so far, right? It definitely took its toll, and we're seeing that not just in the interactions that we have with individuals, I know within our own families or even in our course of work, but even in the data, right? Like we look at the numbers and seeing that we're still, facing high unemployment and understanding the kind of not just economic costs, but the mental costs, right? And of what this will look like as we try to get out of it. In particular, when we think about specifically the American dream, you can even see the impact that it's having on the younger generations, right? If we look at millennials, who, as Jalen mentioned, lived through the Great Recession and now through the pandemic, they tend to have a lower or index lower in terms of the belief in the American dream. I mean, they still believe that it's there, but it's still lower when you look at other generations. And so these things do have their tolls. I think, as Dionne said, it's evidence that the pandemic has exposed areas where we still need to improve as a country. And I think that's the real, another real opportunity for us is to think about not just getting back to where we were before the pandemic started, but actually figuring out how we can get to a better place even before that. Because we know that while that may have been good back then, it's still not good enough. It wasn't good enough because there were still people that were being left out. It wasn't good enough because it wasn't ready to deal with the types of things like a pandemic. And while this pandemic may have been the first time in this generation, and many of the experts will tell you that we have to be prepared for things like this. And so we can't just go back to where we were before. We've really got to take a hard look and see, what are the promises that America has said she will make, and how are we living up to them? There's still much more to do, and we have to really strive to get to a better place.
Thank you, Jorge. I have two final questions which I'd like to ask to each of you, okay? It seems to me that whenever we hear about people like the three of you who've achieved great things, part of the story is always about grit and persistence on their own part, on people's own part. But there's also very oftentimes a story about other people who believed in someone, who offered help, sometimes at some very pivotal moment in their life. Jalen, you overcame big obstacles to become a world-class athlete, and you also overcame a tremendous setback when you faced a career-threatening injury in the Fiesta Bowl, your last college game. You had people who believed in you then. And Dionne, you've just published a wonderful essay in the Catalyst, highly recommended to everyone, in which you describe the powerful support you received from a very determined grandmother and aunt, And also you wrote about help from a teacher who introduced you to an elite academic program when you were just 10 years old, and that put you on a path to where you are now. I'm sure, Jorge, you have your story too. I don't happen to know it right now. But all of you have lived this. We've all lived it. So I want to ask each of you to reflect on how each of us participating tonight can play that role in helping lift other people up, especially people from disadvantaged communities. Jalen, will you go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, I kind of live my life by a slogan and a saying I created. It's called a clear-eyed view, and what it stands for is a focused vision. It's broken down into 3 pillars: a focused vision, determined belief, and earned dreams. I believe everyone should have a clear-eyed view. No matter what you're doing, no matter your makeup, your growth capacity, anything. Having a focused vision is a laser beam focus on what you want to accomplish, on what you want to achieve in life, accomplishing your purpose. I believe a determined belief. The second portion of that determined belief is all about a self-belief, a belief in yourself. It's about a belief capacity. It's about a belief in God that He has your back, a belief in others. Understanding the people that believe in you, doing them right. And then from there, it's about earned dreams. Being able to live the American dream is about earned dreams. It's about how bad do you want it. It's about what work are you willing to put in to accomplish that. It's about opening every lens to be able to accomplish that. That's how I live my life. A clear-eyed view is something that stick with me. And it's something that's helped guide me to become the man I am today. I just encourage everyone to go get it, to whatever you want to accomplish, go get it. Believe in yourself, and you can accomplish it. It goes to underestimate. We got to understand how much we need each other in this world. And I think that can be a great start to helping everyone achieve this opportunity.
Dionne, how can we all help lift other people up?
I think, Jalen made just such wonderful comments about, the belief that one should have in oneself. I'm going to add my own, rather than reiterate what he said, I will just add my own kind of flair to that. I mean, I do think that it's very difficult for me to look back at any point in my life and not see where someone else has lent a hand. And that hand could be advice. It could be financial support to our family. It could be, I had a teacher that instead of letting me take the train would drive me from one part of Brooklyn to the Upper West Side. Those small acts of kindness are ways to think about giving back. I think we get caught up in what are the big things that we do, that we have to do. But it's really these small incremental things that we do intentionally every day to make someone else's life easier that allow us to interact and be a better society. I mean, even right now, I have, you mentioned Penn Track and Field, I have a few of those in my very good friends on this call right now in full support. And they're people that I talk to multiple times a week, multiple times a day. They're accomplished in their own right. And that sense of community and giving back is a way, right, that helps me. And so I think find the thing and place that drives you. There is so much work to be done. Right? And so find the work that you will inherently, authentically show up for all the time. And be in that space and do it. For me, it's businesses, it's women, it's entrepreneurship, it's people of color. That's my space. For Jorge, it's immigration and policy. For Jalen, it's very similarly entrepreneurship in the minority community. But if we do other things that aren't true to us, we're not going to show up in the right way for people that need us. So that's all I would say. Find the small nuggets of things around you that allow you to plug in consistently and intentionally.
Thank you. Jorge, your turn. How can we all help?
Oh man, I can't possibly follow up with such the eloquence and beauty that Dionne just laid it out there for everybody. But I'll give it my best
That's
shot.
not fair of me, sorry.
Look, I think what has been said echoes true to me. I think, as Jalen said, you got to believe in yourself. People, we have the ability to apply our talents, know what you're good at, make sure you're applying them in a way that not only improves your life, but is find the fulfillment in helping others through those talents. I think you have got to make sure that, to me, one thing that echoes true is then also, while you believe in yourself, don't overlook anyone. In fact, oftentimes the people that are overlooked are the ones who have the most to contribute. And that rings true when you're looking at folks in minority populations, at immigrants, or just anyone that's being othered, right? You've got to understand that there is contribution possibilities, opportunities that can come from anywhere. And so if you believe in yourself and you're ready to go out there and contribute, and you're also looking to make sure that you're not going to overlook anybody, then the possibilities are endless.
Well said. Thank you so much. So last question, wrapping up. Got to keep it kind of brief, but nonetheless, I'm really looking forward to your thoughts on this. Each of you does amazing work that brings you into contact with a lot of people in many cases who face a lot of barriers and need help and are trying to pursue their own version of the American dream. So I want to ask you each, how optimistic are people out there? Is there finally hope that we're going to actually succeed? We're actually going to move forward with this vital work of extending the American dream to more people. Jorge, why don't you go first this time?
I've been told I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm going to say yes, there's optimism out there. Now, we can't be blinded by it. I think we are still in a pandemic. There are a lot of people suffering, and they're suffering even if they don't tell you. Even if they still have their jobs, even if they're still in their homes, they're suffering because of all the things that we've discussed over the past hour here, right? Whether you're looking at the mom who's now juggling childcare, education, the job, the house, or the man who's like trying to figure out how to reinvent his business because he doesn't know what comes next. I mean, it is happening across the board, and we can't ignore that. But I know, at least when I speak to folks, there is this sense of frustration, but there is still this sense of hope. They know that we're going to get through this. They just want to see how they could do it faster. They want to participate in it. They don't want to sit back and wait. They want to participate in the effort to bring us back to be much better than we were before.
Jalen, are you seeing optimism and hope?
And I believe it's there. I believe it's based on, what area or what space are you looking at? There are people who don't have hope, and I believe it comes down to a lack of awareness and a lack of understanding. The more we can come together and really communicate about how we can achieve the American dream, and then from there helping create the opportunities and the access and things of that nature. You hear the cliche saying of knowledge is power, but it is, and it must be channeled in the right direction. So we got to get to work.
Dionne, last word.
Yeah, I think I participate in a space of, if not me, then who, right? And I'm around go-getters and hustlers and entrepreneurs who operate in a very similar mindset. And some of it, like we mentioned earlier on this call, is out of necessity. Some of it is out of a desire to make a better way, a better life. And some of it is out of a desire to just change something that inherently has not been working for them. And so on that sense, in that regard, there's hope. And it's hope met with frustration. But the underlying theme to all of it is, if you push hard enough on coal, right, you get diamonds. And I do think there's something to be said about that. We've been pressure testing this system so much and for so long, particularly in the last year, that we just know that underneath all of it, we are going to see some kind of shining light and diamonds that come out of that. And I have people that sit on both sides, but the general sentiment is we will get this right? Because there's no other way to go. We've already kind of seen the bottom for many people, so there's nowhere to go but up.
It is my great honor at this point to thank Dionne Gumbs, Jorge Lima, and Jalen Smith for being with us tonight for this fascinating conversation. Without question, each of you all are sure doing your part and then some to bring the American dream within reach for more Americans. Thank you for the great work that you do. I think we've learned some important lessons tonight. I would suggest we've learned that access to capital, access to just help, mentoring, access to people who believe in you. These are important barriers. We've learned that there are, on the other hand, countless great efforts afoot to try to extend the American dream, extend opportunity. You've heard about the specific efforts of Dionne, Jorge, and Jalen. You've heard, as Jalen said, that we got to understand how much we depend on each other. And finally, I think that we have learned that there really is a role for all of us because, as Dionne said, there is so much work to be done. I would like to thank Highland Capital Management for making tonight possible as presenting sponsor of the Engage at the Bush Center series. Please join us for the next two Engage at the Bush Center programs. On February 23rd at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, we'll hold a virtual discussion of immigration and border policy with our own Bush Institute experts. And on March 11th, a conversation with Dana Perino of Fox News about her upcoming book, Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women from a Former Young Woman. Dana will also touch on current events and reflect on her time as President Bush's White House press secretary. Look for details on both events next week at bushcenter.org. To all of you who shared your time with us tonight, thank you and good night. Be safe.